Hello everyone, Santos from the future here. You will realize that in this episode we speak of the mini budget and everything that happened with the UK economy. But you will know, I'm pretty sure, that Liz Truss has resigned as of a few days ago. So the whole episode almost is kind of irrelevant. But what we speak about is still interesting in seeing how it got here and how we got to Liz Truss resigning and Kwasi Kwarteng being sacked barely a few weeks into being Chancellor and Liz Truss barely a few weeks into being Prime Minister. We are also sorry about the sort of like video problems, but we are working on that. So yeah, enjoy the video.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of the Mildly Interesting Podcast, revamped for Season 2. Today we'll be talking about the mini budget that effectively tanked the UK's economy, as well as the implementation of Hong Kong's national security law on legal minors. If you like the stuff that we do here on the podcast, please do give us a good rating. Listen to us on Spotify, give us a like on YouTube, check out the website, mildly-interesting.co.uk, I believe.
That's the one.
Yeah. Yep, I will remember it off by heart someday. And obviously follow us on Twitter and Instagram. A lot more active on those nowadays because, of course, of this little revamp. But without further ado, my name is Akash.
And I'm Jean Sant.
And this is Mildly Interesting.
Mildly interesting. No, seriously, just mildly interesting.
So, Santos, how are we this evening? How are you feeling today?
Oh, we're in beautiful grey England is how we're feeling at the moment. So, yeah, looking like it's going to rain a lot. But other than that, it probably exemplifies very well how UK politics is doing at the moment. So,
yeah,
there's a nice segue for you.
It's a very nice segue. I think both of us are doing a lot better than Kwasi Kwarteng, who just got fired from his job as Chancellor of the Exchequer, Chancellor of the Exchequer, just after 38 days of being instated. This is all due to a mini budget that was implemented by Liz Truss's government, also a relatively new Prime Minister, as she is set to prepare for, and this is a direct quotations, a mother of all U-turns. With the economy in freefall and Tory MPs plotting a coup, Liz Truss has ordered officials to look at the mini budget again and reverse her tax cuts. This is very much still a developing story. I think Liz, as we are recording this, Liz Truss just wrapped up or is holding a press conference to line out her, like I said, mother of all U-turns on the mini budget that Kwasi Kwarteng had set out. Santos, why was this mini budget so controversial?
Right, so I must say before, I don't know if you know this, but Kwasi Kwarteng getting sacked from his job at the Treasury essentially makes him the minister of the member of Treasury and the Chancellor of Exchequer, the fastest one to be sacked since the war essentially.
Oh my god.
The only one that beat him died in office, so that's why he beat him. So he's the fastest to ever get sacked, got fired.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but as to why, it was essentially just a lot of tax cuts really aggressive tax cuts mainly was the reason why it was so controversial. But not because, if your or my taxes were to be cut, I doubt we'd be that mad about it. But the problem is, it really focused on people that were earning way more than you or me. So there are a few measures, especially, that are really controversial in this mini budget. The first one, which is probably the least controversial one, because I believe everyone kind of agrees to it, is the energy bills being capped at $2,500. That's just really good with the way the prices are going at the moment. But now the real fun starts, because, well, to preface this, I suppose you have to understand every person working in the UK has to pay income tax, right? Which is divided into 3 parts. So people who earn between £0 and £37,000 a year have to pay 20% income tax. Those between £37,000 and £150,000 have to pay 40% tax. And, well, before the mini budget, and now since you got reverted, 45% people who earned above 150,000 had to pay 45% of their earning into tax, right? So essentially, what Liz Truss and Mr. Kwarteng did was cut the tax rate so that people earning over £150,000 a year would only pay 40% income tax, which would grant him around £10,000 more every year. They also, and I think this was to sort of appease the common person, decrease the basic rate, so that's the 20%, the initial 20%, by 1%, making it 19%.
Yeah.
Which sounds good, but in comparison, you only, like, the common person will only benefit a few hundred pounds every year, whereas someone earning above 150,000 would now benefit tens of thousands of pounds, which is it is quite a big difference, I think. Obviously, this was later reversed, like the one that I'm just about to say, which is the corporation tax. So essentially, corporation tax was set by Boris Johnson to increase from 19% to 25% over a period of time by next year. And Liz Truss just wanted to revert that, essentially, making it stay at 19%. And literally, 1 hour before we started recording this, maybe a few minutes, they just reverted this one as well. So you can already tell that it's not going too well. The other fun one was, and one that I really don't understand, is the uncapping of the size of bankers' bonuses. So for those of you who don't know, bankers, lawyers, and those kind of professions, they get bonuses at the end of the year that are essentially based on performance, which means, essentially, that is totally arbitrary, because if it's just performance, you have to measure performance, and measuring performance can be very subjective in many ways. So essentially meaning that they can now be awarded over double, which was the last restriction, of what they earn, right? So not only can they earn over double, they can earn just an uncapped amount, which is, bonkers, kind of. But what do you think, Akash? Are there any other measures that you think should be highlighted, or is this good enough? Is this drama enough for now?
So I think one of the other things we should highlight is the fact that they also, the mini budget isn't all that bad. Like you said, it scrapped the 1 point, I don't even know how much, but it was a 1%, like 1.2% rise in the national insurance that Boris Johnson's government implemented. They reversed that. And they also got rid of plans from Rishi Sunak, from Boris Johnson's era of governments, I guess you could say. They scrapped the plan to increase the alcohol duty or impose alcohol duty, which, it's not all that bad, like I said, but I think, and this is no surprise, Kwarteng's bill also furthers a trend in Tory politics by cracking down on universal credit, the sort of benefits program to those UK citizens that earn below a certain threshold. So basically, claimants who earn less than £142 a week will have to prove they are trying to work more. Otherwise, they will see their benefits slashed, essentially. Which is fucking mind-blowing to me. That you're essentially telling people on benefits, can you prove you don't want to be on benefits? Can you prove that, please? Can you prove that you don't want to be poor? Otherwise, we're gonna make you poorer. It's just it's ridiculous. Also, another benefit for pretty much only the extremely wealthy. You used to have to pay stamp duties on houses, but the mini budget scrapped stamp duties of homes for homes priced up to £250,000, with a further exception, with a further wave of stamp duties for first-time buyers for up to £420,000, which that doesn't help me if I'm still paying 20% of my income, and also, 19% technically, but if I'm paying 19% of my income, energy bills are raising, wages aren't rising enough to cover the cost of living crisis. But yeah, sure, scrap the stamp duty tax on fucking up to £425,000 houses. That will help me buy a house. Thanks, Tories. Sorry, I'm so mad about this because this bill is so obviously centered around helping the rich. It's insane. The top 0.1% who make around like £600,000 a year will gain at least an additional £22,000 under this proposed budget, and those with incomes in the excess of 1 million will gain an additional £40,000 thanks to this crap. And I'm glad they're turning it over, because even people who agree that like cutting tax rates for the rich may like be a gamble in like raising private spending, guess what? The only way this gamble pays off is if other market forces out of the government's control, like for example gas prices or the Ukrainian-Russian war, also swing in favor of the UK economy, which if you look in the past, it hasn't. So it is ridiculous to me that this was even thought up of.
Yeah, no. Here's the thing. I think we have to explain a little bit, because these are a lot of numbers and it's a lot of jargon that is kind of hard to understand at first, I think. But yeah. These policies are essentially what's known as trickle-down economics, right? So it's essentially what it is measures that essentially help those at the top, with the hope that they will then invest and boost the economy that way, because it will essentially the investment will trickle down into those working for them, right? So you could say, for instance, they imagine if they get a car, that will help the manufacturing of the car, that will help the people selling the car, it will help repair shops. That's the whole idea behind it. The problem is that when you are in an environment that already promotes less spending, right? So if you have like prices going up, it only really, that like trickle down economics only really like works for those like earning huge amounts. And you might think that 150,000 is a huge amount, and it is, but a lot of those people also have spent 150,000, right? So only those earning well above that amount will actually reinvest properly to make a difference. So essentially, wouldn't work. So you have to think back to the times Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan. They did the exact same sort of policies of trickle down economics, and had essentially so like just really small growth in GDP and in other economic measures as well. So anyway, they implemented the changes, right? And then what, Akash? What happened? Why are we talking about this? Like, we know it's bad, but what happened from it? What's the problem?
Essentially, even though the Tories believed in their mini budget, even though some economists said, it could work, what they're implementing, it could help short-term growth. When the budget came out and was announced in September, the markets essentially flopped. The FTSE 100 fell below 7,000 following Kwarteng's speech for the first time since March. And that's a lot of economic jargon, and even I do not fully grasp it, but essentially the FTSE 100 has not gone this low since the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war. So just imagine the economic impact that war had, and then it's about the same impact that this guy's shitty ass speech had. Sorry, I'm being a bit unprofessional, but this really has got me heated up. The British pound also dropped to a new 37-year low against the dollar, and it got to the point where the yield on 10-year government bonds had to be increased. So essentially, the government was assuring you that... So the way government bonds work, very simply, is you buy a government bond for a certain amount of money. The government takes your money, and in exchange for that bond, you're given a certain amount... You're given your money back over time, plus interest. You're basically investing in the government. But faith in the government got so bad that the 10-year government bonds had to increase their yield just to entice more people to buy them and invest in essentially this plan, because this plan wasn't cheap. So the government claims they will cover the cost of the budget by borrowing money, and it's very debatable over what the rough estimate of the actual cost for funding these tax cuts would be. What the government promotes was, a small number, about £4.9 billion over the next 2 years. But if you actually look at the spreadsheet and sum up all the numbers without any roundings, and then you also include the additional energy bill support package, the cost for these tax cuts, for this whole budget, in fact, would be £109.4 billion over 2 years, just 2 years. And that is calculating it based on pricing and costs today, this year. So essentially, long story short, this mini budget was so bad, it killed what hope the Tories had for the new government, for Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. And it also killed the market, essentially. It killed the UK's short-term growth plans.
Yeah, it was it was very interesting. I don't know if you heard it, but essentially when Liz Truss announced when Kwasi Kwarteng announced the mini budget, Liz Truss was just about to go on essentially a radio spree. It's really common for prime ministers to do so. Go on local radio, radio channels, and just be questioned. And she was absolutely destroyed. It wasn't. At some point, I kind of felt bad for her. She was actually just being destroyed by the journalists, which is... It kind of shows you a lot, because it doesn't happen all that often. yeah, so what's the way, what's going to happen now? What's the way to go about it? Well, in my mind, decreasing taxes is not necessarily a bad thing, right? It drives investment up if it's done correctly. And you kind of want to do that in a way. The problem is you want to find the line between dismantling the economy and not doing anything at all. And it is a hard line to find, but throwing a bunch of extreme measures at the wall and dragging the economy along with it and hoping that something sticks is not a way to do it. So if I were to guess, what will happen now is over the next few weeks and months, the government will probably rewrite most of the mini budget, if I were to guess, or most of the things that really matter in the mini budget. Except maybe for the energy bill, I think that's the kind of thing that's kind of the measure about the energy bills getting capped. I think that's everyone just kind of agrees on that front. But on the 31st of October, there will be an announcement for a medium-term package to help the economy, to boost the economy and fight inflation, essentially. So by then, I would imagine that we'll have two things. One, maybe a prime minister on the way out, who knows? And two, the mini budget almost completely revamped or just U-turned, essentially. But yeah, what do you think, Akash? Do you think it's gonna just... Well, I guess the main question is, do you think Liz Truss will stay in power until or after the 31st of October?
I think we have to come to terms with the fact that no politician really knows what they're doing. Because I don't do this. But let me just read you the rough notes I had. Let me just read you the notes I had an hour before this recording. Liz Truss has since called for a U-turn on the decision to scrap the top rate of income tax for high earners. A spokesperson for Truss claimed that there were no plans for any further U-turns and that the tax cuts outlined by the budget would go ahead as planned.
Well, that aged well, didn't it?
Kwarteng will set out broader economic plans on October 31st, 3 weeks earlier than originally planned, and help to calm the markets. That was my notes an hour ago. Now we understand that Kwarteng has been fired, the mini budget may be scrapped entirely, and Liz Truss has lost the confidence of all of her party. It's so there is this one saying that stood. All this has seemed to doom the relatively new prime minister and chancellor, which it has doomed the chancellor. And an MP went on record and said that Miss Truss has 3 weeks to sort out the economic mess, and dismal showing in the polls, but later corrected himself saying, I think she's got till Monday now. So, who knows? Who knows?
Listen, by the time this comes out, if anything, and there might be a lot of things have changed on this recording, just know, everyone, that we do keep updated with everything. It's just it's just really hard right now to
ridiculous.
So it might change from by the time this comes out. So yeah.
Keep your eyes on the prize.
Keep your eyes on the prize. All right then. So Akash, I think you need to cool off a little bit. So how about we do something more lighthearted and go for a conspiracy of the week? That's one of our segments, my favorite personally. So why don't you start us off, Akash? What's your conspiracy of the week?
Okay. I actually don't know if we've done this before.
Right.
I'm not sure if we've talked about this conspiracy theory before, but it is quite a famous one, okay? So, what do you think of when you hear the word birds?
Birds.
What do you think of?
I think of, I don't know, pigeons.
Right. What if I told you
Oh no.
that birds aren't real?
What, all birds?
Okay? All birds. All birds, okay? Okay.
Okay.
At least in America.
Oh,
Okay?
just the American birds are not real.
just in America. So
okay.
So this movement, this conspiracy theory claims that all birds, every single one of them in the United States, were exterminated by the federal government between 1959 and 1971,
Right.
and replaced by look-alike drones used by the government to spy on citizens, right?
Right. Okay.
So, mind blow, all of the birds.
All
dead,
of the birds.
okay? Yeah, it only took about, 20, not even, 12 years? 12 years. It took about 12 years to exterminate all birds, in America at least. So, the specifics of these theories are, of, the general, birds aren't real theories, aren't really consistent, but, there's evidence. Why do you think birds sit on power lines? That's to recharge, man. That after a heavy day of spying on citizens, the drones have to recharge by sitting on power lines, right?
No, they've got
You know how
they've got
you know how
Bluetooth like batteries, dude.
I'm not done. You know how birds, you walk out and it's always oh, a bird shat on me, or a bird shat on your your car or something, right?
Is that tagging, is it?
Yes, that's how they track you. It's a tracking method.
Right.
Now, I know what you're thinking. What else is there to this conspiracy? 2 words. Well, technically 3. John F. Kennedy, right?
Okay.
You think that he was assassinated because of his political moves? Yes. He refused to kill all the birds, and thus he was assassinated by his own government, right?
Oh no. No, dude.
Yep. That's it. Yeah, John F. Kennedy cared about the birds too much, refused to put them into extinction, so he was killed off.
See, I've heard a lot of things about John F. Kennedy, but that's a new one. Wow. Who would have known?
So I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, but this conspiracy was started as a satirical conspiracy theory. And it was started on a whim. But the person who created the conspiracy theory, Peter McIndoe, he did not publicly state that he did not truly believe the conspiracy until 2021, and he made the conspiracy theory, he started promoting it in 2017. So
damn, that's a long time.
I have this image in my head that he's your younger cousin who was doing something mean to you, but as soon as you stepped up to him, he was like, "No, it's a prank. Yeah, it's a joke. Don't worry about it." Yeah. I think this guy truly believed birds aren't real, and then when everyone pointed out the science, he was like, "No, it's a joke. There's cameras. Don't worry about it."
No, but
it's satire.
But listen something though, Akash. Have you ever been to the US?
Yes. No.
You haven't. Exactly. So how would you know?
Fuck, you're right.
Exactly. Yeah.
How would I?
How would you know?
I don't know. Maybe U.S. birds aren't real.
Well, how about we move on to mine now? What do you think?
Yeah, no.
So, listen, I am going to talk about another bird. But this is a different kind of bird. We're talking about planes now. Right? So, here's the thing.
Okay.
Apparently, the Denver airport is really fishy because reports on this vary, but essentially the two main reasons as to why it's fishy is because it's either the hub for the Illuminati or just straight up a portal to hell. So for some reason, people believe this just because there's a statue of a gargoyle on the airport, and it's really, really realistic. So people believe, you know what, it must be a portal to hell, right? And apparently, so someone who did a documentary on this said it's literally, and I'm quoting right now, literally a new age cathedral full of occult symbolism and references to secret societies. So, yes. So here's the thing: there are a lot of weird paintings and like murals in the Denver airport. I was, you can put some on screen actually, but they're really weird. But they're not references to secret societies or secret government conspiracies. But anyway, the airport is said to have secret Illuminati tunnels underneath the airport, omens of the apocalypse on the murals, and more importantly, people believe they have lairs for the lizard people. So, yes. Now, here's the thing. We all know that conspiracy theorists tend to believe the smallest, nugget of information that could maybe very stretched out confirm their conspiracies, right? But my hat goes to whoever the spokesperson for the airport is, who said, you may or may not have heard, the airport of Denver has some secrets. And this apparently was enough publicity to grant them about $2 million in publicity. And it is now one of the most well-known airports in the US. Just off of conspiracy theories. And apparently, actually, the tour guides on the airport also play into it. So there was a journalist that went into the airport, and the tour guide said, and they asked him the question, and the tour guide said, well, I'm quoting again, well, I'm almost 20 years of working here, at which point I get my own underground bunker. And everyone just went nuts. And my hat just goes to those workers because they're keeping it just really funny.
What the fuck's happening at Denver Airport? What? I wanna go there now.
Exactly, that's the point. Everyone just wanted to go there, so now they have free publicity. It's amazing.
That's smart. That is class. That is
exactly.
Talking about mysteries and things that seem out of order, you may realize that we've changed our clothes.
Well,
or at least
actually, I haven't. I've gone for continuity.
Oh, you haven't changed your clothes?
No, I was like, you know what? I'll put the same t-shirt because continuity.
Well, it is a new day because yesterday we Santos's camera cut out. It died.
Yeah.
So we're for you guys, it's pretty much no different, but to us, it's been 24 hours. Liz Truss has probably already been fired by now, but it's fine. So, so it's a new day, and it's a new topic. Hold on, wait. Sorry. So, like we said, it's a new day of recording, and we're in a... fuck. I'm just, like, freezing up right now.
Don't worry, just go for it. Just go for it. Like, just whatever. Don't worry about, like, nice segues or anything. Just, like, doesn't matter.
Okay, yeah. But with that little technical difficulty out the way and sorted, we now move on to Hong Kong's latest implementation of their national security law, being the targets being minors, 5 teens who were aged between 15 and 18 years old, were charged for urging an armed revolution under the national security law, and have been sentenced to 3 years in a correctional facility. Most of the 4 out of the 5 teenagers were already in custody, had been in custody for a year. Now, it's important to note that the Hong Kong national security law has been a thing since the 30th of June 2020, but this is the first time we've seen it been used in court to prosecute essentially children, legally children. Justice Kwok Wai Kin said that the defendants had advocated a bloody revolution to overthrow the Chinese state at street booths and on Instagram and Facebook after Hong Kong's adoption of a sweeping China-imposed national security law. Kwok, and please keep in mind as I say this, he's talking about 15-year-olds. Kwok called the alleged incitement a serious crime, but said he had taken into account their age and immaturity as he sentenced them to a training center, or in our terms, a detention facility, rather than jail. The length of stay, kept at 3 years, is left for correctional authorities to decide. But Justice Kwok went on record to say even if only one person is incited by them, the social stability of Hong Kong and the safety of residents may be seriously endangered. There's no evidence to directly prove that anyone was incited by the defendants to subvert state power, but the real risk exists. Santos, how did we get here?
How did we get wow.
to the point where a Chinese-imposed national security law leads to 15 to 18-year-olds being sentenced to essentially 1 year in custody and 3 years at a correctional facility for what would normally be a case of just public disturbance or public nuisance, I guess.
Well, Akash, it seems like you haven't heard the Chinese authorities. It wasn't public. It wasn't just a normal act. It was a revolution. That's why they were arrested. But in all seriousness, so you mentioned in 2020 there was a national security law that was implemented, which essentially criminalizes any acts that the Chinese authorities deem to be secession, subversion, or terrorism, or collusion with foreign countries or external forces. So, by the way, terrorism here can be something as little as damaging public transport. Like, say you key a bus, that's an act of terrorism in their books, and therefore they could just arrest you if they wanted to. So far, and this is like research published by Chinafile, which is in partnership with Georgetown University, the latest figures that I've seen is that up to 110 people have been arrested because of this national security law. And usually it's just activists, protesters, lawmakers are against the current regime. But now, as you said, obviously 16 to 19-year-olds are also being arrested, which is really, really frightening. It just really, puts into perspective the kind of powers that the Chinese government has and like the lengths that it's willing to go in order to enforce their views and to stay in power essentially. As to how we got here, so Hong Kong was a colony of the British Empire, right? When they essentially gave it to China, essentially, they were supposed to keep the freedoms instilled by the British in Hong Kong. So that's freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, independent judiciary, and democratic rights like free press, for instance, and the right to protest. So this essentially is what is commonly known as one country, two systems. We've talked about this in the podcast as well, which is, it is the same country, technically, but two different systems. One of them is more democratic, that should be Hong Kong, and the other one is China, and we all know what that's like. But recently, especially like 2019 with the protests and 2020 with the implementation of this law, we're increasingly seeing the two systems merging together and just essentially taking the sort of like Chinese example. I even see this in sort of emigration almost, because you see a lot of Chinese people from mainland China, from China, going to Hong Kong, not because of what Hong Kong is, but rather because they're being incentivized to go there and open businesses there. And the idea essentially by the Chinese government is that if more people go to Hong Kong from China, they will essentially act in like transmitting what they were told back in Beijing. So that's essentially how we got here. In a nutshell, I suppose. There's a lot of other details, but like I suppose resume, like the overall idea is this, I think.
Yeah, and I think when this national security law first came into effect, critics were quick to call it the end of Hong Kong. And it's because Hong Kong, like you said, has always been seen as I'm not going to say democratic beacon, but it was a more free space, a city of kind of different thinkers and anyone between democratic activists and just European businessmen. Hong Kong was a very sort of diversified city that gave a voice to pretty much everyone from every political background. So what China is essentially doing is trying to take more autonomy away from Hong Kong and impose a Chinese rule on it. Santos has already talked about some of the articles of the law, which, by the way, all 66 articles of the national security law were kept secret until its passing, which is how they managed to get away with it, or get away with it passing without there being any like pre-opposition. All the protests were after its implementation because no one really, it was kept in the dark. But some of the articles include the fact that the Office of National Security can send cases to be tried in mainland China, but Beijing has reassured us that it will only have this power over a tiny number of cases. It also states that Hong Kong will have its own national security commission to enforce these laws, but there will be a Beijing appointed advisor leading it. So again, it's more of like Beijing is setting up institutions in Hong Kong to be governed by them, to take autonomy away from the Hong Kong people. Hong Kong's chief executive will have the power to appoint judges to hear national security cases, and that sounds like a good thing, but so that sounds like a good thing, but the issue with this is China has also introduced sweeping reforms to Hong Kong's electoral system, so the chief executive has to be approved by Beijing. So essentially, what this is in practice is the chief executive, which is appointed by Beijing, will have the power to appoint judges to hear national security cases. And I think this is, if that wasn't enough, some trials are legally allowed to be heard behind closed doors now, and people suspected of breaking the law can be wiretapped and put under surveillance, and Beijing has ultimate say over how the law should be interpreted, not any Hong Kong judicial or policy body. So you can see how this is problematic, especially for many Hong Kong residents and many people who just work in Hong Kong, because the national security law explicitly states that this applies to not only permanent residents but non-permanent residents and people, quotation, quote, from outside Hong Kong who are not permanent residents of Hong Kong. So everyone. So it's worrying for people who live in Hong Kong and who do business there, or who just, like, even for people who just like Hong Kong, because this drastically changes the idea of protests, demonstrations, dissent, because anything that's seen as subversion, promoting secession, colluding with foreign forces, or terrorism, which again is defined as pretty much anything from blowing something up to damaging a public transport, but any crime committed will fall under the national security law, and people who are found guilty can be sentenced to the maximum life sentence in prison. So that's already bad, but now, in the most recent case, we've seen legally children, be prosecuted under it. And it's different. This case is obviously different, and it's like newsworthy because it shows truly that no one is safe from this law. If you are seen to be subversive to the Beijing government or Beijing's presence in Hong Kong, you can be tried and you can be prosecuted easily and more efficiently under this law. Santos, what do you think, based on like the trend we've seen, what do you think is in the future for Hong Kong? Or at least, let's say, do you think we'll ever see Hong Kong and China return to the one country, two systems policy?
See, I don't know. I feel it could go either way, to be honest, I think. And although if I had to guess right now, I would probably go with, incrementally through the years, maybe within the next decade or so, you'd probably barely be able to distinguish. So the only differences between Hong Kong and China would be on paper almost and not actually real. Obviously, like you said, the fact that it's children, that it changes everything. It makes sense from the point of view of the Chinese government, because obviously students are well known for being very, protesty. Students like to protest. They like to have opinions. That's, look at us, right? That's exactly what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So it makes sense, but it's obviously very terrifying, because imagine everything you do could be just monitored and punished if it slightly goes against what someone in the Chinese government might think. So it's really terrifying. I don't think it will get better, to be honest, at least not in the near future. It will probably get worse, if I were to guess. Although, because of what's going on between China and Taiwan, you might be seeing, more attention being thrown into the area, which might be good. Might sort of like slow things down, like change a few things. Who knows? But I'm not too hopeful for the near future, to be honest, when it comes to this.
And that has been another episode of the Mildly Interesting Podcast. We hope you were mildly interested. If you like the stuff we do, go give us a follow on Spotify, rate the podcast, and go give us a like on YouTube. We have a website, mildly-interesting.co.uk. We got some journals up there, and we post all of the videos up there. We have some articles on there, and we have all the episodes up there as well. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. I'm a lot more active on there now, so, expect a funny tweet from me or a little insightful post every now and then. But, yeah, I think that's all the plugs. Without further ado, I'm Akash Lush.
And I was Santos.
And this was Mildly Interesting.